Hi everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of TV Talk. I'm Sarah, and today we are going to be talking about some of our favorite books that have been adapted for the small screen. To get us started, we're going to talk about some graphic novels or comic books that have made their way to the small screen. Lucifer, which is currently airing on Fox, is a very rough adaptation of the Vertigo comic series written by Neil Gaiman. This show is a cop procedural with a supernatural twist. Lucifer, the devil, teams up with LAPD detective Chloe Decker to investigate crimes and punish criminals. However, this show really started to take off once it got away from the cop procedural aspect. Season 2 tended to focus more on the angels and demons part. They introduced new characters such as Lucifer's mother, and it began to dive into the divine and supernatural elements. However, if you go in expecting exactly the comics, you may be a little disappointed. So it's a good idea to keep an open mind with this one. This show airs on Fox. It starts airing new episodes in May, and they have been renewed for a season 2. So if you've been watching the show, go check out the comics. If you've read the comics, maybe give the show a chance. You might like it, you never know. So the next show we're going to discuss is also based off of a comic, and this show is Legion. It's been a pretty buzzy show this spring. It premiered mid-season, and a lot of people have been talking about it, both fans of the Marvel Universe and people who just like really good television. This show is based on a Marvel comic, and Legion follows David Haller, who's an incredibly powerful mutant who initially believes he has schizophrenia, but then he finds out that there's something more. There's a lot of really cool mutants in this aside from David. Sydney, she's somebody that can swap bodies with anyone she touches. And Tanami, I don't know if I'm saying that right, who can remember everything in perfect detail. The show is very psychedelic. I've been told it has great cinematography. I have not watched it yet, but it is on my to-watch list. Great cinematography, great storytelling. It's by the people who did Fargo. So if you were really into Fargo, the anthology series, check out Legion. Another good reason to check out the show is Aubrey Plaza. She plays a character named Lenny. And in interviews, she and the creative team have said that the part of Lenny was originally written for a middle-aged man, but she came in, somehow auditioned for it, and her performance made them kind of change the character, and she got the part. If you only know her from Parks and Rec, definitely check this out and see her performance because it is something completely different from April Ludgate, and she is awesome in this role. This show is airing on FX. It premiered mid-season in February. Season 1 is only about 8 episodes long, so not that much to watch there, but it has been renewed for season 2, so we have that to look forward to. Now we're going to move on and talk about some novels that have been adapted for television. And the first novel we're going to talk about is The Handmaid's Tale. This novel was written by Margaret Atwood in the mid-1980s and looks at a United States that is not the United States we know. It is now a dystopian society in which women do not have many rights. There are women known as handmaids whose sole purpose is simply to reproduce. This novel, as I said, was written in the mid-1980s, and it was Margaret Atwood's way of addressing some of the social struggles of that time period. However, due to recent current events, the novel has gained popularity once again. A lot of people are checking it out. And even though there have been previous adaptations of it, Hulu decided to take this novel and turn it into a 10-episode series. This show will premiere in late April and will consist of 10 episodes, all available on Hulu. Elizabeth Moss of Mad Men fame will have the starring role. Samira Wiley and Alexis Bledel will also play roles in the series. If you can't wait until late April to get your Margaret Atwood Handmaid's Tale fix, check out some of Margaret Atwood's other novels or check out some of the previous adaptations of The Handmaid's Tale. Our next novel, or shall we say series, that we're going to talk about is one that a lot of us probably read in our childhood, and that is A Series of Unfortunate Events. A Series of Unfortunate Events was a 13-book series written by Lemony Snicket, real name Daniel Handler, and it followed the 3 Baudelaire children, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny. These children were orphaned after their parents had died in a mysterious house fire, and they are sent to live with their uncle, a distant uncle, named Count Olaf, who he does not really care about the children. All he wants is their money. And throughout the series, he develops a number of disguises and personas to try to trick the children out of their fortune. However, these are the most amazing children you've ever met. They invent stuff, they read a lot, they're just really, really awesome children. And, it's a series, there's a lot of books, it's popular with kids, so you'd think that this would have already been adapted into something, and it actually was. In 2004, the series was adapted into a pretty poorly received movie. Jim Carrey starred as Count Olaf. I mean, that's really all I remember, pretty much all most people remember. Meryl Streep was actually in the movie, which was very surprising to find out. I did not remember that from my childhood. But basically, nobody was satisfied with the film. There were rumors that another film was going to be made. Nothing ever happened until Netflix got the rights to a series of unfortunate events and decided to turn it into a series. They didn't have any set parameters because they wanted to make sure that they could tell the story in the best way possible. So in January of this year, a series of unfortunate events premiered on Netflix. Neil Patrick Harris, like everyone's favorite actor, is playing the role of Count Olaf. The first season was, as I said, released in January of this year. It was 8 episodes long, and it was pretty well received. Lots of people liked it. The first season covered the first 4 books of the series, and in March they announced that season 2 was picked up, and that will cover books 5 through 9. And while it hasn't officially been announced, it is rumored that a 3rd season will happen, and that'll cover the remaining books, I think 10 through 13 in the series, but of course nothing has been confirmed yet. So while you're getting ready for the next season of a series of unfortunate events, re-binge watch season 1, check out the books from your childhood. I did that recently, very stressful. Did not remember them being that stressful as a child. Maybe even watch the Jim Carrey movie, compare him to Neil Patrick Harris. It's all in good fun. Now these next 3 novels are personal favorites of mine, and the first one that we're going to discuss is Big Little Lies. Big Little Lies is a novel written by Australian author Leanne Moriarty. Big Little Lies follows the lives of 3 women, Madeline, Celeste, and Jane. They're all kind of PTA moms, but they have secret histories, different things going on in their lives right now. I'm keeping this purposefully vague because there's a lot of mystery in this one. All I'll say is that there's 3 women and there's a murder. And it's very interesting to watch how their lives unfold, how they're all connected to this murder, and you really don't know what's happening until the very, very end. And it was just a fascinating read, and I'm sure it's a fascinating watch as well. On the surface, the book and the show can seem very shallow, especially when you say it's like a PTA mom murder mystery, but it does address some larger, more pertinent issues that are important to discuss in today's society. Again, keeping it very vague so as not to spoil anything for anyone. This show is currently airing on HBO. It has a ton of star power. Reese Witherspoon, Nicole Kidman, and Shailene Woodley play the 3 women, and they are giving phenomenal performances. It was conceived to be a miniseries, so there will most likely not be a season 2. The series ends April 2nd, so if you haven't been watching it, now's a great time to catch up and get ready for the finale. Our next novel that we'll be talking about is the novel Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. And yes, this is Gillian Flynn, author of Gone Girl. Sharp Objects was actually her first novel that she wrote, and it follows a woman named Camille Preaker, who is a reporter who returns to her hometown to investigate a series of murders. And she uncovers some information about the town and herself that is truly startling. When I read this book, I really enjoyed it. I maybe even liked it a little more than Gone Girl. It was very, very interesting. After the success of Gone Girl, it was a very well-received film. Gillian Flynn, of course, wrote the script for it. A lot of people were eager to adapt her other projects. Dark Places, another one of her novels, received a film adaptation starring Charlize Theron, but Sharp Objects was kind of left in limbo. There were rumors at one point that it was going to be produced in France as a film. There was another rumor, I think at one point, that Lifetime was going to pick it up for a TV series. And eventually it landed at HBO. In April of 2016, HBO announced that they would be producing an 8-episode series of Sharp Objects. Gillian Flynn will serve as kind of in a showrunner role. She's also going to be writing some episodes. She will be working alongside Marty Noxon, who has a lot of writing credits. She's written episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, of Grey's Anatomy. She won a Peabody Award for the show Unreal on Lifetime. She will be writing a lot of the episodes. The series will also be directed by Jean-Marc Vallée, I believe is how you pronounce his name, and he is directing Big Little Lies. They recently announced that Amy Adams will be playing the main role of Camille Preaker, and Chris Messina of the Mindy Project will also have a role in the series. There is no official release date, which is very upsetting because I'm eagerly anticipating this show, but HBO has greenlighted it. It's in the works. Maybe it'll air sometime this year. Fingers crossed that it does. Another adaptation for HBO is the Cormoran Strike novels. Now these might not sound familiar, but they're a series of books written by Robert Galbraith. That name might also not ring a bell, but this one should. J.K. Rowling, the lady who wrote Harry Potter? Yeah, Robert Galbraith is her pseudonym, and she writes these mystery novels under his name, and these are fantastic. They follow a man named Cormoran Strike, who served in the army as kind of a military investigator, and he returns from the Middle East. He has lost a leg, he's coping with that, he doesn't really know where to fit in, he suffered some personal losses, so he decides to open up a private detective agency. And he, alongside his assistant slash secretary slash other detective, Robin Ellicott, solves some crimes around London. These books are incredible. They're beautifully written. Think like the best mystery you've ever read with also just like the language and writing style of Harry Potter. They're fantastic. And they were just begging to be adapted to the screen. And the BBC answered the call. The first 3 novels are going to be developed into a 7-episode TV series. Of course, future novels also have this same option. Tom Burke will star as Cormoran Strike, and Holliday Grainger will play Robin Ellicott. The show is going to be airing in the BBC in the UK sometime this year. HBO has bought the rights for the US distribution, but they have not released a date for when it will air. While you're waiting for that, check out the first 3, and also J.K. Rowling has announced that the 4th book, entitled Lethal White, very interesting, is going to be released sometime later this year. So if we don't get the show in the States this year, at least we'll have her new book. Our next novel that we will be discussing is American Gods, another adaptation from Neil Gaiman. American Gods deals with how religion exists in the United States. Immigrants are bringing their faith over, and it grows differently in the new country. So you have different versions of the same gods depending on which country you're in. This show takes the approach of representing technology and the gods through actual people who are immortal but can die. The story revolves around a character named Shadow Moon, who is released from jail to attend his wife's funeral. He's hired by a man named Mr. Wednesday, and they travel around America meeting strange people who turn out to be gods. Mr. Wednesday is gathering these gods to kind of bring them together in preparation for a conflict between the gods and then the new gods, like the media. The show will star Ricky Whittle as the main protagonist, Shadow Moon, Ian McShane as Mr. Wednesday, Gillian Anderson of X-Files fame as Media, and Orlando Jones as Mr. Nancy. And American Gods will begin airing on Starz on April 30th. Our next show that we're going to be discussing is another BBC original called North and South. And these are based on a novel written by Elizabeth Gaskell, who is actually a friend of Charlotte Bronte, which is really cool. These novels were originally written in the 1800s, and they focused on the growing industrialism within England. And they looked a lot at working class relationships and strikes. Gaskell explored the differences between the cities and then the elites of the countryside, and ended up writing a love story between Margaret Hale and John Thornton. Margaret Hale is from the countryside and moves to the city with her family, while Thornton has elevated himself and his family to become members of the upper strata of society. He's used a lot of hard work for this and doesn't really come from money. Now he owns a mill where Margaret ends up going and becoming friends with the workers. There's tension between them because they share varying views on industrialism, different kinds of, politics, but the romance between them shows that, the two sides can make up and be friends and get along. Margaret ends up learning that all of the problems of the mill are not clear-cut, and that, maybe there are reasons that people are mistreated, and Thornton has to struggle with learning to treat his workers better. So they kind of help each other understand each other's sides, and also you get a great love story out of it. The adaptation is very, very, very faithful to the original source material, which I don't know about you, but I always love it when the book and the adaptation are like really close. Richard Armitage of The Hobbit and Hannibal stars as Thornton, and Daniela Denby Ash of EastEnders stars as Margaret. And North and South is available to stream on Netflix. And our last show that we're going to be discussing is a masterpiece classic, and that is Poldark. And the Poldark book series began in the 1940s, written by Winston Graham, ran through the 1970s, and it follows Ross Poldark, who comes back to England after the American Revolutionary War and finds that not all is the way he left it. For starters, his estate is like totally messed up, and the love of his life, Elizabeth, is going to marry his cousin, Francis, which is not cool. He must tend to his broken heart, so he kind of goes off, reopens his father's mines, and he eventually falls in love with his maid, Demelza. The main antagonist of this series is George Warleggan, who has now become part of the upper class. He's elevated himself to this upper class through banking. The story does explore tensions between classes. George worked hard, but he's manipulative and obsessed with stature. Ross inherits his title, but doesn't have the wealth, fights for the lower classes, and seeks to protect them. This series is very similar to North and South because it deals with the time change and conflict between classes, but it just explores it in the setting of Cornwall. The television adaptation features Aidan Turner of Being Human and The Hobbit in the role of Ross Poldark, and Eleanor Tomlinson from Jack and the Giant Slayer and The White Queen plays Demelza. The major differences between the books and this adaptation is that the books were written in the 1940s, 1950s. I think we all know how women were viewed back then, and today, in this girl power age, we expect a lot of our female characters to have more agency than they would have in the 1940s and 50s. Because of this, on the television show, the women of Poldark, such as Demelza, now have more complicated stories that, they're exploring the dynamic of their character and looking at their struggles within the patriarchal society. Poldark is, of course, on PBS Masterpiece Classic, and the third season is currently being filmed. Thank you so much for watching this episode of TV Talk. As always, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, WMTV 1693, and check out our website and all of our social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you know the drill. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.